Hey everyone, it's Lisa Danforth, and I'm here with the fabulous Sara Munro, and we're talking today Sustainable Leadership Live. Sara is going to be sharing her experience and knowledge, which is deep, on following the path of purpose, mission, and values. But before we jump in, I really want to share a little bit about her and what makes her so brilliant. All right, so Sara's professional career has spanned the rise of digital marketing, requiring her to pirouette with each new opportunity. She has a broad range of communication and public relations experience in the nonprofit and in the private sectors. And Sara is currently the Chief Collaboration Officer and owner of Bay Haven Consulting, and also the co-host of Social Chatter Live. She's worked in PR, fundraising, event planning, and digital marketing, both in-house and as a consultant. So, Sara, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love talking about this because this is actually one of my hidden career. Since I moved into marketing communications, a lot of people don't know that I have a very deep background in leadership development, organizational development, and it's something I love talking about.
Which I would imagine you bring to every area of your life, whether it's personal, whether it's working with your clients, the marketing that you do,
Mhm.
all of it all begins with that leadership within.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. We were talking earlier, I started as a college student in developing my leadership skills. And no, I'd even go back to high school, developing my leadership skills. And as a drum major of the band, how many people can say that? And then I studied it in grad school. It was a passion of mine as an extracurricular in college, and then really focused on leadership development, organizational development in grad school. And I have to say, I use the skills every single day, every single day.
Hallelujah. I love it. If we could do
Yes.
that more, right? Really looking internal and looking at that leadership of who we want to be.
Hmm.
So let's talk about mission, purpose, and values and how following that path supports us to either sustainability, achieving the success that we want in a sustainable way.
Hmm. Sure. I think when we think about purpose, vision, and values, we tend to think of it more on an organizational level, and may even think of it as a nonprofit organization thing only. That our mission, when you are not profit driven, what are you driven by? And I think this is a place where business owners, private sector, and us as individuals can really look at and say, what is my purpose? What are my values? And I'll use myself as an example. Right now, I'm rebranding my company.
Okay.
I'm working on web content. I'm like the cobbler. I work on other people's websites. It's been many years. It's a little embarrassing that I don't have my own website, but I'm working on the about page. And I've spent 3 hours over the last 2 mornings working on my about page. And I realized, wait a second, I need to have some fundamentals. Before I talk about what I do and what I'm about, I need to clarify what are my personal values, what is my purpose, because then that helps lead me to my decision making, right?
Mm-hmm.
This past year, I took on a project. I knew I could do it, but it's not really the core of the consulting that I do now. I knew I could do it. I thought, you know what, it can help me finish the year strong. Why don't I do it? And it was a slog to get through. And in the end, I wasn't showing up as the person I wanted to be, a person who is consistent and reliable, because it was so outside of what my purpose is,
Mm-hmm.
as a worker, as a teammate, as a leader, that it took me a really long time to finish. And I'm a little embarrassed by that, but I own it and I'll move on from it.
Yeah, I think owning it is the big thing because then we can pause, step back, and look at why did I actually do that? Because it
Mhm.
sounds like it created something that wasn't truly sustainable, either because it was a slog, but also just because it wasn't within your wheelhouse. It wasn't within your mission.
Right, right.
So I want to give a shout out to Dory. Thanks so much for joining us. She was on last week.
Yeah,
Hey, Dory.
absolutely, absolutely. And before I forget the thought, I want to talk a little bit about that decision-making process too, right? Because yes, we can take on the things that can be a slog, but the other thing is when we look externally, we can start chasing I call it chasing the shiny penny, right?
I
Something
love
new
it when you
pops
talk
up.
about this.
I know. I love the shiny penny concept because it's so applicable to many different things. I mean, for my core business right now, marketing communications, we always have a new tool that pops up, right? TikTok popped up a few years ago. Instagram Reels is now a year old. Facebook just announced Reels is expanding worldwide, right? It's the shiny penny of social media right now. But if your goals, if your strategy, if your mission isn't in that short, catchy, entertaining video, then that's a shiny penny that you use for us to apply for, to work with rural physicians on. It was a bioemergency response, right? Now that's a very clear need that we know after we're now season 3 of the pandemic. We know that that's something that's really critical. But 15 years ago, it wasn't something that was totally on the radar. But our mission was to educate healthcare providers. So it was very clear for us to chase that grant because it was completely within our wheelhouse. And if we looked forward enough, that we knew that if there was going to be an incredible pandemic or a bioterrorism attack or something that was going to spread across the country or across the state, it would start in these rural practices need to be a key player in healthcare. So that shiny penny was not just this little flash or trend that we could pick up. It was actually going to become core to what we did. So the shiny penny really helps. That analogy really helps you make the decisions. Is it what our purpose is? Is it what our audiences need? Right? So that's another thing. Is it what our customers expect of us? Is it something that we anticipate the need? And if it's no to either of those questions, then you can leave it behind, right?
It's so true. It's that threshold that we need to get over because I find that often when we can align with our core values, our mission and our purpose, all of that, you can have a choice in front of you that is actually difficult to make. But when we're comparing them to, is this a part of our mission and where we're going? It's so much easier to say,
Right.
great, it looks like a really cool opportunity, fabulous shiny penny, but it's actually a distraction and it allows us to stay focused and stay within our lane and following that path that we're on.
Right. And that doesn't mean that you can't change lanes later, right? New information comes in, you can change lanes later. In the nonprofit sector, we call it mission creep. And I think a lot of people have a laugh about that. But yeah, when you keep incrementally creeping away from what you do, like I did with that project at the end of last year, I was incrementally creeping away from it. It was really hard to do. And I didn't fulfill myself or the client in that relationship.
Can we talk just a little bit about boundaries? Because really what I'm hearing is that the boundaries weren't necessarily really cut in to be able to say, this is not a part of the work that I do. And that is a struggle that I find nearly everyone struggles with at some level. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, there was this wise business coach named Lisa Danforth who
I love me some boundaries. I'm
I
just
love
saying.
the boundaries. I have to say, I took one of your workshops about a month ago, I guess, and it was on boundary. It was on time. It was on time management, actually. And you had the greatest thing. I actually wrote it down to prepare for today. It says, what you say yes to and what you say no to equals your future, right? When you say no to something, it opens you up to the next yes. And that can be really difficult. Yeah, it can be really difficult if you're a solopreneur, if you're just getting started in business. It can be difficult if you are sort of working your way up to in a company that You always want to be that go-getter, always a
Hmm.
team player, take on the tasks that are hard no matter what. But sometimes saying no, or stopping and just considering, is this where we should go? Should I say something? If I am trying to get up to that next management position, should no one's saying that this isn't a good idea,
Hmm.
or being the devil's advocate, hate that term, but basically saying, hey, I think we need to consider this other side. And speaking that truth to power is really important. Not just to have a good outcome, but also to show that you're not afraid to speak up and to stand up for what you believe in.
We need the psychological safety though, right? We need to
Mhm.
have a safe environment. And I think this is what sustainable leadership is about,
Mhm.
is creating that sustainability in which we can show up as our authentic, awkward selves, decide to offer something new and not be tapped down, right? Or
Right.
dismissed. Then we start sort of dimming our light and no longer
Right.
contributing.
Right, exactly. And we talk about corporate culture all the time when we're in organizations and businesses. There's nothing to say that you can't have your own corporate culture and say, this is the culture that I know that I will
Mhm.
thrive in, and writing it down, right? I have my own personal corporate culture, and it helps me decide who I want to work with and how I want to show up when I am in house or the hired person to come in house, right? That there are certain values and cultural pieces that I bring with me into
Mhm.
whatever situation that I'm in. I have my own personal values that I carry with me as a leader wherever I am, whether I am a friend, a daughter, a partner, a collaborator, a consultant, or
Mhm.
a staff member, they carry with me.
Can you share a bit about, because what you just said is just so very important. Can you
Mhm.
share a bit about when you find that you're off course? Some tips or some
Oh,
tools to sort of bring you
yeah.
back. Because my thing is whether you're just one toe down the rabbit hole or it's just your toe exposed,
Right.
how do we revert and be like, "Hey, wait a minute, this is not where I wanna go or who I want to be in
Mhm.
this moment." Can you
Right.
share tools or an experience for yourself?
Sure. I don't remember. I've been doing a lot of reading, like you, Lisa, doing a lot of reading this last year, and I can't remember if it was Mel Robbins or if it was Brené Brown. It was one of the 2, these 2 great women
Mm.
writers that I love following, podcasters too. Um, it was the concept is, if something isn't working, like if you aren't getting something done, if something that you know should be easy isn't, that is a signal that that you're off track, that something is wrong, right?
Mhm.
If you're not feeling yourself, and sometimes not feeling yourself or feeling anxious, there's some degree of that in starting something new. Like Lisa, you're starting this new live show, right? I'm
My
sure
belly
that
was
there's
flipping before I hit live,
yeah,
and I love
yeah,
talking, so
yeah, exactly. There's some level of nervousness, and
mhm,
that's okay. That brings the excitement. So the key is to figure out where's that difference? Is it
mhm.
dread or is it excitement? Right?
I love that. I had a coach telling me that I needed to start a Facebook group. And every time I thought about it,
Mhm,
there was dread. Like, do I
mhm,
push myself out of my comfort zone? Is it something that I just don't want to do or I'm afraid of doing? And I just
mhm.
decided, like, every time I thought about it, it was this heavy dread feeling. And I thought, I don't need to do it if it's bringing dread. What else can I do? Which is when I really started leaning into starting back the leadership live.
Mhm.
But I love what you're saying, which is if it's not fitting, what else
Right,
would? Or where's a different perspective? And for
right.
me, it all comes back to pausing. There's such power in pausing so that
Mhm.
we can choose differently. Like you said, what we say yes to, what we say no to is
Right.
creating our future.
Right, right. And it doesn't matter where you are, right? If you are taking on a new client, if you're starting a business, if you're considering a job, if you're considering a volunteer position, if that doesn't feel right, if you, that moment of self reflection at the end of it, if you still feel that dread uncomfortableness,
Mhm.
then that's a sign. And it's really important to listen to those signs. I think the younger generation, I think Gen Z has it together when it comes to this, right? Because they have
Better
grown
than us
up.
for sure.
Exactly. They've grown up in this interconnected world, and they kind of know where their boundaries are, right? And
Mhm.
what's okay and what's not okay. They've really learned that, and aren't afraid to express it. And I think those of us who are a little older can really learn from that, that it's not entitlement. It's actually that boundary setting, like you talked about, and being clear about who they are, even though they're very young, right? Being clear about who they are and what kind of environment that they're willing to accept.
And what I also love is being unapologetic about it. I talk about that
Mhm.
a lot, communicating powerfully without apology. Just show, as long as we're clear, respectful,
Mhm.
that not apologizing for stating what we want or choosing, like you said in the very beginning, setting those boundaries and saying this isn't in alignment with who I am and not apologizing for it. This is
Mhm.
not what I want to be doing. Here's the name of someone who can help you with this.
Right, right. And that's something that I think we really need to reckon with. Now we've done it a little bit in communities, but we really need to do that in businesses, nonprofits, whatever you want to say, right? Any kind of relationship they're a part of, is that authentic self, right? We talk a lot about that authentic self,
Mhm.
but there are a lot of times where you can't show up as that, right? You'll seem as younger generations may be seen as entitled. We talked a lot about the millennials.
Mhm.
Um, have this sense of entitlement. They're just expressing their boundaries, right? Um, us as
And we're
women,
not used to it.
yeah, we're not used to it. We're not used to, there's that corporate culture, right? Where
Mhm.
you sit a certain way, you act a certain way. Women, especially if we become impassioned about something, we're emotional, right? Black women, especially, have to walk this fine line between, are you passionate or are you fury, right? And do we let go? I think we're at a point where we can let go of that. We have to let go of that, because if we want to be clear about those boundaries and have other people accept that, we have to let this staid corporate culture go, right?
I absolutely. And so to tie it back in with your purpose, your mission,
Mhm.
and your values, I think allows us to choose a career, choose a business, choose a leadership style or culture that is in alignment with more of what we want and be unapologetic about it.
Mhm. Right, right.
Can you
Brene Brown has this great phrase. She says, "Paint done," right? Have you heard
Yes.
this
Oh, that's it.
phrase?
Paint done for me.
Paint done for me. And it's really related to projects, right? Tell me
Mhm.
what the end project will look like. And we can do that with our own personal boundaries, personal values, who we want to work with, where we want to work. Paint done in your mind about who you will be in those scenarios, and then work backwards. But I interrupted you. Sorry.
No, I love no, totally worth like I don't remember what I
Mhm.
was going to say. Other that was just phenomenal. And when we
Mhm.
have that longer term vision of what
Mhm.
we want, of our purpose, of our mission, of our values, and the life that we want to live, is when we can choose unapologetically to step into it. Brene
Mhm.
Brown also says, you and I quote her all the time,
I
uh,
do.
those that are, she's done a ton of studies, and those who are the most boundaried are actually the most compassionate as well. We always feel like when we have those boundaries, it feels rigid and divisive. But study after study is showing that those who have the most boundaries, who are the most boundaried, are also the most compassionate. And what better way to lead than with compassion and
Mhm.
empathy?
Mhm. Right. Right. And to be flexible. There is a degree to flexibility in your boundaries, right? Life
Mhm.
changes. I used to be a molecular biologist. So I was at a bench
You blow my
working with
mind.
tests. Yeah. And I now teach Instagram, right? Well, really, there's a lot more to marketing communications and public relations, but some days I am teaching Instagram, right? So you never know where you're going to be, but I am that same person along the way.
I think, yeah, we do get to choose our boundaries. And I think we can also be fluid within our boundaries with specific people and not so fluid with specific people. But I'm noticing that we are at time.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, if I may ask you one question, which is, what one habit have you implemented, or a system that supports you in leading and living a life of sustainability instead of this overwhelm?
Right. It took a long time for me to develop this. I used to have a no meeting Friday policy. Now it's Friday is my accountability day. So it's when I actually have an accountability partner. We check in every week. I help her with some social media pieces. She helps me with operational pieces, but we basically hold each other accountable for our to-do lists for the week. So check in with something that Doreen talked about last week too, that agile focus, that agile process. With what did I do? What's next? What challenged me kind of questions. I plan out the next week. Friday afternoons, I plan out the next week in my bullet journal. I'm a big bullet journal user, list maker.
You do a great job at the bullet journal, I've got to say.
Yeah. So it's a great tool. Before it was just lists, right? It was the same kind of concept, but I would work through lists. Like when I worked at an agency, I would sort of look through all of my sales pending, sale callbacks. I would plan out the call list for the next week on a Friday afternoon so that it was out of my head. I could relax over the weekend and didn't have to think about what the next steps were Monday morning. It freed myself to then think about other things over the weekend and have a broader vision.
The leader that you wanted to be. Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, sure. They can find me across social media at Sara Munro VT. I recommend you jump on to LinkedIn and send me a message and let me know that you saw me on Lisa's show, and I'd be happy to connect.
Wonderful. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And everyone, thanks so much. If this was helpful for you, please feel free to share, invite people to watch. Sarah is just a wealth of brilliance and can really support you at every level. Please join me next week at 10 o'clock a.m. East Coast time for another show of Sustainable Leadership Live. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you.